Well, welcome back to another awesome episode of Be Inspired Podcast, where we're inspiring you to live the abundant life you deserve. This week is going to be another awesome week. I have a great topic coming forward, and I wanted to just talk about legacy because I don't know if you saw the videos, the Instagram, the pictures, but recently I went home and I was able to touch base and get back to where it all started, Before we jump right into it, I just want to thank all our subscribers, everyone that watches our episodes. If I say anything, if you like the channel, go ahead and have a conversation. Let's comment, like, share, and let's keep it moving. All right. So, legacy. What does it mean to leave a legacy? Is it money, power, buildings with your name carved into stone? Or is it something less visible, like values, vision, impact, right? So I wanted to talk about this topic because when I went back home, it just hit me that I'm carrying on a legacy. And I talked about this a little bit before in one of the previous episodes. However, I just want to go ahead and deep dive into it because my dad is from a little country in the Caribbean called Montserrat. And my mom is from a country called Nevis. St. Kitts and Nevis. And they both moved to the Virgin Islands, VI, St. Thomas, St. John, St. Croix, Water Island, Little St. James. Little St. James as well. But yeah, so they came from those two islands and they grew up on St. Croix. They got married, started a family, started their legacy in the Virgin Islands, right on St. Croix. So my mom and dad didn't have much when they started, right? But throughout the time, my dad got his certification for masonry. He got his certification for mechanics and was able to build multiple different businesses. One was a mechanic shop called Rodney's Auto Repair, and then it was also a grocery store business that he ran and he also sold in the future, right? So my mom was also there, and together they were able to build this legacy where they were able to acquire land or acquire property and able to leave a legacy and leave things and pass down things to their family. And when I touch home, usually I was like, I ain't going back home. I ain't doing stuff at home. My mindset was I'm here, I'm carrying it on, I'm doing my thing. But it never occurred to me that I was carrying on a legacy until I touched foot on that island again. When I touched foot on the island, it taught me that, man, I'm carrying on something that started from literally nothing. So I wanted to talk about, before I go deeper into that story, I wanted to talk about two of the families that created legacy, one successful, one unsuccessful, as it relates to our family and us creating a legacy and you creating your own legacy. So one of the families is the Rockefellers. And everybody knows about the Rockefellers. If you don't know, they're one of the richest families in the world. And they created what it is, trust, wealth that lasted more than three generations. I think they're at like the fifth generation now or six that is consistently growing and have not lose their wealth. And if you don't know, Rockefeller was in the oil business and they were one of the ones that started their company based on oil and was giving away money as far as philanthropy and giving back to the communities, right? So, with that being said, there's also the Vanderbilts who were also wealthy, right? Two different stories. So, the Rockefellers were able to get through about five, six generations with their wealth. However, the Vanderbilts, even though they had a vast amount of resources and money and founded the school, Vanderbilt University, their wealth deplenished to where it only lasted about three to four generations versus the Rockefellers. So it's all about leaving you creating a legacy and realizing that you're coming from parents or grandparents that maybe couldn't even afford what you do afford now, as far as like maybe two cars in the driveway, maybe maybe you now have a home, maybe two homes, and what you are doing is carrying on a legacy. And it's great that you are doing that, but you also got to protect it so it could continue growing like the Rockefellers did. So with that being said, I want to talk about the four things that you're going to need to help build that legacy, right? So the first one is going to be a trust, like protecting your wealth, protecting your assets from from taxes, from lawsuits and everything. The way that the wealthy protect their assets is through trust, is through building a structure so they're keeping more money than it's going out. So, all right, what's a trust? A trust is there's two different types of trust. There's an irrevocable and a revocable trust. The revocable trust is a living trust, and the irrevocable trust is the ones that you can pass down and give directives to your family. That so your home, your assets doesn't have to be going through probate, and you don't have to have the government decide, well, we're going to take this amount of money from you. It's already set in the trust, right? So that's the first thing. Setting up a trust, getting you a attorney that knows what they're doing with trust and knows how to set it up, just like the Rockefellers was, so you can have that asset protection and have that legacy that you now are creating to live on for as many generations as you want, right? So with that being said, as far as creating the trust, you have to have a solid foundation, you know? We talked about the trust, but having a foundation. What are your values? What values do you want to live on? You know? What thought process, what kind of philosophies you want to live on? What kind of ideas? What do you want the story to be? So, like for example, with my family, one of the stories that I want to live on is that my dad came from an island. My mom and dad came from an island, you know, and they came to another island to become more successful. I left that island to become more successful, and we're growing and creating a foundation to grow the family wealth, to keep it growing so that I think I said it one time that we were left with this amount of stuff, and my goal is to take on the torch and keep it going, maybe leave my family with 5 to 10 properties, maybe 20 properties, you know, in order to keep that legacy growing, and not just to acquire them, but to have them in that trust so they could live on generation to generation and not have to continuously start from scratch, right? So, and that's how the wealthy stays wealthy. They set up their children with life insurance policies, with different policies, which lead me into the third thing. So, life insurance policies, right? So, there's different types of life insurance policies. There's the one that is term life, which a lot of people know about, but there's also something called whole life. And whole life may seem like, man, like, what's the purpose of it? I'm not going to be able to. There's a lot of myths about whole life insurance, right? But what I do know about whole life insurance is that you're able to borrow against the cash that you put in. Yes, initially you won't be able to, just because it has to grow, it has to get vested, all that good stuff. So it may be 2 to 3 years where you can't touch the money, or even sooner. I don't know. You got to talk to. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a financial planner. I'm not insurance agent. So you definitely got to seek out one of those in order to find out more. But think about it like this: a term life, you're paying every month into the plan, right? You're paying every month for the insurance. If something happens within that time frame, or whether you took a 15, 20 year period, then they'll pay out to you, right? However, if nothing happens, you lose that money. With whole life insurance, you are able to contribute. And then what happens is you raise your death benefit, and it doesn't matter when you pass away. It's not a time frame on this. Whenever you pass away, that death benefit gets paid out. And if you've been consistently adding to it, which rises the benefit, right? And that's how they fund their legacy. I talked about trust. I talk about like funding the legacy, the foundation, right? But this is how they fund it. When anyone was born into the Rockefeller family, they were given they got a max value life insurance on that person. So I don't know how much it would cost, but each person would get a whole life insurance policy on them. And if anything happens, they were able to use those funds from the life insurance policy to replenish the trust. So say you were born today and like 20 years down the road, you had the policy was $1 million, right? So when that person died, $1 million go back into the trust and funds the trust. And that way they're able to borrow against the trust. They're able to borrow money and it will go back in. So the next family member, the next generation down could borrow against the money or strategically borrow against the money, right? Because it's not like how the Vanderbilts were when they just through different parties, they bought a whole bunch of stuff and a whole bunch of different buildings. No, it's strategically. It's a plan, a process, a foundation that you have to follow. So if you want the money out, you have to show a plan or something like a family office, a secretary that will approve or deny your loan when you go into the bank. So think about it like that. That's exactly what they did to preserve their wealth and what you can start doing to help you preserve your wealth through life insurance, through a trust. And then the last thing is just having different philosophies that would last a lifetime, like determination, a family crest, a family constitution. What is important to you guys? What do you want to live on? What stories do you want your third, fourth, fifth, maybe even sixth generation to remember about you? Is it you had an awesome real estate business, or you were one of the best therapists in the world, or you had an awesome podcast, or whatever it is that you want to your legacy to look like once you leave this planet, leave this earth, because right, dead. But we can have our legacy live on for us. What books are you gonna write? What songs you're gonna sing, what sports you're gonna play that the family enjoys watching, you know? So it's just about creating your own legacy and having the foundation, the philosophy, and a trust to help protect all of that. There's a whole bunch more that goes into it, but like I said earlier, I'm not the expert, but if you're looking for more information, use Google. And then one of the books that I used were or recently read about creating trust and protecting your legacy was what would the Rockefellers do? So if you're looking to learn more about protecting your legacy, creating a legacy, and all that good stuff, go ahead and check out that book and it will give you all the information you need. And then I just wanted to finish up the story that being at home was an experience that really was captivating because for the first time in a long time, I really felt connected to my home. And for a while, even though I like, represented it, I didn't feel really connected. But this last time that I went home, I really feel like I want to be there more often. And I don't know if you know how that may feel. I left back in 24 back in 2008 and I go visit, but I haven't really had that strong connection to like go back. But experiencing this, going to the farm where I grew up on, like Island Dairies, my babysitter used to live on a farm. And her husband used to milk the cows, had a whole process of milking the cows. It was like a factory kind of thing. And I would go down there and help put on the suctions on the cows and clean up the poop and spray it down. And it was a whole farm that they were dealing with. And the milk used to go to Island Dairies, who's now shut down. But Island Dairies were one of the places that everybody bought milk, passion fruit juice, all different types of stuff, ice cream. But so it's just all a good experience and allowed me to reconnect with the history of where I came from and what I meant for me. So if you're from the VI, shout out to you. If you're not from the VI, still shout out to you. If you like this episode, go ahead and like, share, comment. What was your biggest insight down below? And again, this is Be Inspired Podcast, where we're inspiring you to live the abundant life you deserve. And we're going to see you on the next Sunday. Peace out, VI to the bones.